Hi, this is Damon, Director of Mental Fitness at the PTPA, and I want to welcome you to our first conversation of many. We'll be having conversations with coaches, with players, with agents, with player support teams, and also with mental health professionals. But we're going to kick off our series with a coach's corner conversation, and this one is with David Sammel. David is a ATP coach. He's also the author of Locker Room Power, Building an Athlete's Mind. And in our conversation, we cover many topics, including establishing a vision for the type of player and person that the coach wants to develop, incorporating drills and practices that build awareness, focus, and resilience in players, finding ways to create pressure situations in practice, having more skin in the game so that players are more prepared in competition. Also, David shares some of his own personal practices and routines to maintain a consistent state and be able to handle the grind of coaching on the tour. And then also, David shares a little bit of his philosophy about building his coaching toolbox by seeking professional development opportunities that might not even be inside of the game of tennis. So, with that, I bring you David Sammel.
So I started to realize, a lot of mental toughness comes from being good enough as well.
Mm.
And so competency and mental toughness. So in my head, I started to formulate philosophy that it's all mental at every level, but to jump levels, your competency has to go up as well.
Mm.
And then they go hand in hand. And then also I learned something, actually when I was in Texas, which was about rest. Because every morning I would run 14 flights of stairs twice, then jog out to a track and run a mile as fast as I could, jog back and run. I was on the 14th floor and run up. So, do another set of floor. And that was before I went to school, and then practice every afternoon and that. And, I was still getting tired in matches and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm not fit enough. I need to do more. And and it was only when I had an umbilical hernia and started to realize that actually rest is pretty important. And sports science was in its infancy then. We used to do some crazy things. I remember Chip Hooper came along and he was very strong and everything. And everybody in college started bench pressing like crazy and trying to get big and strong. And obviously tennis players need to be lean, but tennis kind of went through a period in college where everybody was trying to buff up,
Mm-hmm.
so in a nutshell, it was, starting to understand what tennis was about and get a philosophy about playing and
Mm-hmm.
understanding. And McEnroe taught me that better than anybody, which was, you don't have to hit the ball that hard, but if you take it early,
Mm-hmm.
that makes a
Yeah.
difference. And then time became, okay, how do you take away people's time, which, became the foundation of my coaching philosophy and how you do that well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that hopefully gives you a bit of background and being
Yeah.
a competitor,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
had. I was a good competitor, but I
Yeah.
didn't put my tools together well enough to be a better tennis player.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think what jumps out to me is this idea of competition. You had that in spades. You grew up competing all the time. Um, and then the idea of confidence coming not just from a mental perspective, but from a competency perspective. It's one thing to believe you can be better, but you also have to be better. You have to play better. You have to learn that grip change, all of these things that require, a lot of work for you to be able to execute. That's what builds confidence, right?
Yes,
Like,
I have a very simple analogy for this. If you go in the gym, let's say you can squat 100 kilos and you
yep.
need to get to 200 kilos. Yeah,
Hmm.
you can believe all you like. I can lift 200 kilos and go every day in the gym and put 200 and go, I can do this, I can do it. And you're never going to get anywhere. But
Hmm.
if you build slowly, by the time you get to like 185 kilos, you're going
Hmm.
to have a lot of confidence that you're going to hit the 200 mark. But you
Hmm.
build slowly. So, confidence generally comes from, a mixture of, yeah, believe that you're going to get to 200 for sure,
Hmm.
but also understand that there's a process to get there, and that the real confidence that you can do it will come when it's kind of the next step. And
Hmm.
each step of the way, 105, 115, and so you don't really have to believe in yourself. You need to believe in where you're going and believe in your process.
Mm.
And if you believe in your process, then you will get to a place where you have the confidence and belief that you will that the next step is where you kind of want to be.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And then since we're speaking to coaches here, believing in your process is something that you want to try to coach your players to buy into as well. You wrote a great book called Locker Room Power. I believe you wrote it in 2014. Is it
Right.
10
Yeah.
years ago?
I did an update and an extra chapter in it in 2018.
Okay.
But yeah.
Got you. Got it. There's a quote in there that I want to read, and then I kind of want to circle back to maybe how we can, as a coach, work
Yeah.
with players to build this skill. Um, in the book, you write there's a player going through a scenario. You say if your mind is distracted, so that it's not in the present, there's no one mentally there to play for you in your absence. Then you go on to say, when your mind returns to the scene, it's often a vastly different place, with a different score, to the one you left. And then you say, panic sets in. This can easily lead to another mental error, which is falling into a state of regret for failing to capitalize on a winning position. Now, as a former player, as a coach, as a mental performance coach, this is a very this is a scenario that I see a lot, right? This is a big time scenario. Um, so I'm sure we could talk about a lot of different things within that scenario. But I'd like to use it as a pivot towards coaches and building in mental training tools into their practices. And I think specifically, I'm thinking about improving focus, resilience, and even sort of emotional regulation. Um, when I think of that scenario, I want that player to be focused on task, right? I want them to be in the present moment, not in the mind thinking about what might happen. I want them to be aware of what's going on internally, but not get hijacked because of it, right? And I want them to realize that this is going to be hard and that resilience bit. So, with that as a backdrop, I'm just curious about how, on the practice court, you think through being able to help develop a player's ability to handle a situation like that.
I mean, it's a great and very deep question that um the process I go through in my head with players is, number one, you need to make them
Mm,
aware of what they're doing, and aware of the problem, and aware of the solution.
mm,
And so the awareness that when you're distracted, whether it's thinking about, your ranking, or what it means if you win the match, what it means if you lose the match, or, who's watching you, or what, all the outside noise that takes you away from the present, that means your body's there, but your mind is not.
mm,
So there's actually no one there playing for you. So
mm,
once they're kind of aware that, actually I'm not there, okay? And then once that happens, and, 2, 3 games go by and the 4-1 lead is now 4-all, then the panic sets in and everything, and then the regret. And the regret means that you're in the past.
mm,
And again, if you're in the past, there's no one there playing for you. The same thing when people are like 4-1 up, 4-1 up, they're thinking, oh wow, if I win this match, then I get this much points, and then blah 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 blah, and then they're in the future, and there's no one there, and so that awareness is a start. Then the second step is, what can you do about it? Well, yeah, the first thing is to be aware that when you go away.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it might be for 1 or 2 points, but the moment you're aware that you're not quite there, you need to bring yourself back. And this is where the discipline comes in and the resilience. Because when you first start doing this, you might have to do it 200 times in a match. Come on, right here, right now, this point. And you play the point, like, you're back. Come on, right here, right now, this point, be here, be here. And your mind is quite busy then, because you got all these thoughts and you're trying to pull yourself back. You got all these thoughts and try to pull yourself back. But if you keep doing that, you'll get better at it. And then suddenly you'll find you're going, 50 times a match, and some matches only 10 times. And then you start to get much better at recognizing it faster and pulling yourself back until you get in the groove again. And what the other awareness is, and it's, it's human nature, is like, the problem with all solutions is that in the back of their minds, players say, okay, if I do this, then I will win. And like, oh, this is a solution, then I'm going to win lots. And if they don't win doing this, then they try and look for the next shiny object. Oh, that doesn't work. I need to try and do something else. Rather than understanding that this is quite a long process to keep pulling yourself to the present. And you have to keep going through it. And the crazy thing is, whether you do it or not, you will win and lose matches. The difference is, the better you get at it, you will start winning and losing different matches, because you'll be playing better tennis. And when you get really good at it, then you'll be playing at whatever your potential is, and getting better. And accept that the game of tennis is winning and losing. And if you don't do it, of course you're going to win matches, because the guy or the girl on the other side of the court is probably going through the same stuff as you, and also disbanding stuff and saying, oh, this doesn't work, and the problem with that accidental process is, like, when they're feeling it, they play good and win, and when they're not, it's a shit show. You're leaving everything to accident. Like, when the moon and the stars and everything's in line and I play good, I'm very good. But when it's not, I can't, there's no core functionality there that makes you tough, even when, you're not playing that well, and not, your focus isn't that great. You have to keep pulling yourself back. But that is tennis. That battle to pull yourself back to the present all the time, it is the battle, because distractions, and that's why off-court distractions that people say, what I do off-court doesn't matter. No, it does matter very much, because it all helps in this process of bringing yourself back to the present. So you can be in the gym and miles away. And look, doing the work in the gym miles away is better than not doing the work in the gym. But, Arnold Schwarzenegger said this, I don't meditate, because when I'm lifting weights, that is my meditation. I totally get immersed in exactly what I'm doing, and I really feel the muscles, and I imagine them breaking down, and imagine them, healing up and getting stronger. And and that's my meditation, is that I'm so there when I lift weights. In other words, no distractions. So that kind of focused work is a different animal completely
Hmm.
to just getting it done and not, not being there. You know,
Yeah, no, yeah.
there are players that hate doing core. Why? Because to do core well is kind of boring,
Hmm.
but if to do it really well, you got to be very focused.
Hmm.
And again, I think the higher levels you go, you see how the whole focus around the tennis and what they need for their tennis gets much more, intense and targeted.
Mm. Right, right. So on the practice court, are you communicating this as, hey, look, we need to develop awareness when you're drifting and you need to come back. Are you building that into the drills and the training that you're doing on the practice court and being really um, simple with your language with your players about this, or are you just sort of baking it into the training itself?
The baking in starts before the practice, and that's identifying. So, you know, what's your ultimate goal,
Hmm.
right? Okay. All right. What type of person and what are you going to need as a tennis player to be there? And break that down.
Hmm.
Okay. Right. Okay. So we know that you, I don't know, need to have a better serve and more accurate serve.
Hmm.
That's, you agree that that is non-negotiable? Yes. You need to be able to come forward and volley better. Non-negotiable.
Hmm.
Yes. Okay. All right. So when we practice, whenever we do drills that reflect coming forward, your mind's going to be, I need this. This is big. I've got to be really, really targeted with my focus here. And understand that if I don't do it well in practice, I've got no chance of even doing it in a match. I got to build
Hmm.
some confidence in practice so that I at least attempt it in a match. And when I attempt it in a match, I've got to accept that at the start it's probably going to be pretty crap. But you know, pretty crap is fine uh, because it'll get less and less as you get more and more confidence in it. But you have to accept that there is a learning process to it. And some of the downside might be that you're going to maybe lose a match or two that you could have won by not doing it,
Hmm.
but it's worth the sacrifice. But always remember, the reason you're doing it is because you've said, this is what I want.
Hmm.
So once you identify what a player needs and who they need to be, because part of it is who they need to be. So if if you if the player doesn't buy into what you've agreed, you will see it in practice because it'll be like, I don't really feel like it today. You know, yeah, I feel good on that. They do one or two and like, yeah, good, let's do something else. And you say, well, you're not really buying into what you said, and then it just gets down to this. I'll say to the players, well, if you don't buy into this 100%, you're just saying it because you think it's what I want to hear or whatever, then get another coach because I can't watch and be part of this because I don't believe in any other way for you to get there. So you need to find a coach who believes in another way to get there.
Hmm.
Um, and I've very rarely had a problem with that.
Yeah.
And maybe there has to be a slight modification in their head to start with, but that awareness, and then in practice it can be, hey, come on, you know why we're doing it. You know why you got to hit 20 serves at that target.
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
come on, be here and hit it at that target because and really make an effort. And I'll say to them, look, the crazy thing about serve practice, and this I learned from my own playing days, is you can practice your serve at a target, and it's a little all over the place. but somehow in matches, it slowly gets better. It's weird that it never really in practice gets so much better. Like it's, oh, wow, I'm just unbelievable at this target, stuff. But in matches, it gets better. And in key moments, it gets better.
Mm,
So you go through that process.
mm,
And then the other thing in practice that has to be there is an element of physical that is quite brutal to build two things: automation and confidence. So if you do some tough basket drills and timed, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and a series that is really, really difficult, the player gets to a place where they're on automatic pilot because they're just so tired they can't do anything. And often the looseness comes then. And so there's a lot of repetition. And again, though, what I do expect is mentally them engaged enough. It's not just like slapping the ball and don't really care. It's loose, but really trying to still be there and make shots and get more and more resilient with that. So they get used to performing when very fatigued. And that
mm.
builds a lot of confidence. And then the other thing is if somebody's missing, mid-court into out forehands, I mean, whatever it is, backhand line, whatever. If sometimes just literally say, okay, backhand line. All right, let's do it, and we're going to go 20 balls, 30 seconds off, 20 balls, 30 seconds off, and literally feed like, I don't know, 200, 300. You know what? You hit 300 balls, over and over again, you're going to start to find a rhythm. And again, that builds competency around a certain shot.
Mm.
Uh, and it's and yeah, because at the end of the day, you got to get to a place where you can play without thinking, but actually it's without thinking, but you're actually there. It's not without thinking and you're not there.
Got it. Yeah. Let me circle back to the beginning because I think from a mental performance side, I think it's gold. The vision of your ideal self. Who do you want to be? What kind of player do you want to be? And then you reverse engineer from there. You kind of you highlight the place you want to get to. And what I think is important about that is it's not just a ranking, right?
No.
It's not a result. It's who do you want to be? You by definition have to change and transform and evolve and grow to get to this place. And I think sometimes we miss that. Like I want to be top 50. But then I'll respond like, who wants to be top 50? Me. Well, who will you be to get to
Yeah.
top 50, right? And that sometimes is a concept that's not easy to understand if you're a young person, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's I mean, it's a very good point that it's learning to understand that, okay, there's more pressure at top 50 than there is at 200. But if you get to top 50, you'll be a different person. So you'll be able to handle that pressure.
Right.
You know, you're not
Yeah.
going to get to top 50 if you can't handle that pressure. So you will evolve into the person who can handle it.
Mm,
And I'll say, like in the book, I say, paint the dream, then kind of forget about it and just work towards it.
hmm
Yeah. And McEnroe said it great. He said the biggest jump I had to make was from 2 to 1.
mm,
Because psychologically, that's a big change. You're leading the sport, everybody's after you. You know, and you have to, evolve into that person that says, I can handle the sport on my shoulders.
hmm
And the formula doesn't change. You always
hmm
have to evolve into the person that can handle the next step and the step after. And
hmm
I think if players can get comfortable with the idea that this is an evolution. Now, where you're
hmm
going to evolve to, hopefully, is to your dream. But, if you get almost there, it's probably a pretty damn good place.
Hmm. Yeah.
Not everybody, every kid, I want to win a slam, US Open, Wimbledon, whatever. You know, no kid starts and goes, I'd like to be second round of Wimbledon. You know,
Yeah.
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 So the dream is there, and that's fine. But if you look over the last 50 years, how many people have won slams? When when
Mm.
when you get players that dominate, it's not that easy to do.
Yeah.
Uh, but if
Right.
in the process you make quarters or semis, you know, it's not a bad career. So it's as you get older, you get to fundamentally understand that you just do your best, and if you have a great run, who knows what can happen.
Yeah.
But there's not been like 1,000 number ones, because it's pretty difficult to be number one,
Right.
and
Right. Right.
pretty special.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
you can aim for number one, and who knows where you land up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a game of losing too. There's only one person wins a tournament each week. So you could have a great week and you're still going to be the guy shaking hands with a loss, except for one, right?
Yeah.
Um, and if you haven't built what it is that you're measuring your progress and success, then that's a tough pill to swallow. All that, you know what I mean? Like,
It, it's funny. I really believe that some of the most competitive people are the ones who hate losing,
mhm,
but they're also the ones that often burn out and give up,
mhm,
because they're so competitive that it's all about the win.
mhm,
And at some point, if you're a very good junior or whatever, but at some point you're going to hit the barriers, and you're going to lose quite a lot, or a
mhm.
lot.
Yeah.
And if the psychology is, if basically if I can't win at this game, I'm not good enough, and I don't want to do it. And they can be incredibly competitive people, and
Mhm,
but it's that strength that actually becomes the weakness, because of a fundamental flaw in the psyche, which doesn't have the awareness to know that uses competitiveness to get better all the time,
mhm,
and understand that the competitor in you might be good enough to be top 50,
mhm,
but the game is not yet good enough to be top 50. So maybe the mind is ahead of the game.
mhm.
Then you need to go and do the work and make the game match your psychology, that it's good enough.
Yeah.
And so if and that's also comes down to the emotional development maturity of the player. Is you can give players that awareness, and they'll go yes, and they understand it a lot logically, but emotionally they just can't get their head around it. And so every match becomes an absolute trauma, and
Mm.
the brain is not going to want to stay in trauma for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when losses become absolute trauma, uh, whilst it can look good to the outside world, oh my God, he's like he or she's so upset after every loss she can't function for 3 days. Yeah,
Mhm.
so, well, that's a problem, because I had a player where I said who was like that, and I said, well, when you have these terrible losses that hit you for 3 days, if you have 10 of those a year, that's 30 days a year. That's a month less work you're doing than everybody else. So
Mm.
you tell me you really care about your tennis that much? I don't think you do. Because if you
Mm.
really cared about your tennis, you wouldn't waste 30 days feeling sorry for yourself and so upset because of this loss or whatever. Get out there and get better.
Mm. Right. You're using that you're trying to get them to use their competitive nature to be more productive. And that's a victim mentality, it sounds like you're just describing now. Um, you mentioned pressure. and some of the early conversation about your on court with awareness about being here and coming back, also being focused on what it is you're trying to develop, the targets and the backhand line, 300 balls, all that stuff, in a way maybe answers this question a little bit. But a question I hear a lot from coaches is how do you train pressure in practice? Just by definition, practice doesn't matter as much as the match, right? And you're speaking a lot to that, I think, now. Are there any additional ways to frame this to make it matter more, or at least for players to feel a little bit more of that pressure so that they can transfer that over to the competition court?
Um, I mean, I think the Dutch club I played for, Richard Krajicek, was a young player there, and I played with him when he was like 16, 17. And then, I spoke to him after he won Wimbledon, and I said to him, what changed for you, as well. And he said the year leading up to winning Wimbledon, every practice set he played, he put something on it.
Mm.
So, and he said, even if the other guy wouldn't, he would. So he said to the guy, like, okay, if I lose to you today, I'll buy you dinner. And he said, putting something on it every time just added a little bit of extra pressure there. You can never obviously replace match pressure with stuff, but that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
Just put a extra pressure on everything that he did. And he said, guys, wouldn't want to risk, $50 or something like that. But it didn't matter. I'd just say, okay, if I lose to you, I'm paying you $50, and I'd pay him. I'd make sure I pay him, or I'd buy them the dinner, so that I could really feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think that's a pretty good thing. And doesn't it doesn't have to be financial always. It could whatever it is. I'm gonna force myself to write a blog tonight if I if I lose
That's
the
probably
set.
worse. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or I'm gonna do a core session that I hate after this, right after this practice if I lose a set. So
Yeah.
that's one way of doing it. But overall, I try and get players to understand that in practice have a learning mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and just really be focused on getting better. And if you get better in key moments, you can talk to yourself and change the feeling. If you're feeling very anxious or whatever, like, hold on a second, I've done the work.
Mm.
I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I believe that, I'm in a good place now, and I only have to be kind of 1% better than the opponent, and I can get through this. And take what you're doing on the practice court as fuel to be mentally better in matches.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more about changing the feeling than just saying the words. Like,
Mm.
come on, I know I'm strong. Now be strong right here.
Mm-hmm.
This point right here, bring it, all your power,
Mm.
come on. This service game, I've been practicing, be accurate,
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's you're not looking for a solution that's going to get you through every time, because that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's the percentages. Get through a few more times than you used to, and your ranking is going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really hard for players to accept this. It's like they want to win all the time. Yes, of course, and you're going to play with that desire to win every time. But also know the reality is that you just want to win a few more
Mm-hmm.
in a year that's going to put you in a different place.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter how good you get at all of this stuff, you're still going to lose matches, you know.
Hmm.
And it's only, top 3, 4 that are winning like 60-70% of their matches.
Right.
Outside of that, you're starting to drop very fast to like 50%. But,
Right.
it's, and tennis is, players also need to realize is ranking is built on winning streaks.
Mm.
And if you have 4 or 5 winning streaks a year, that's going to help your ranking a lot. If you go 5 tournaments and you hit 50% second round every tournament, your ranking is not going to be nearly as high as somebody who goes 4 first rounds and then makes final.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
uh, you're both going to have a 50% record, but one's
Right.
going to have a whole lot more points.
Right. Right.
So it doesn't matter if you go 5 first rounds if you then make final or win a tournament.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
and I think the best players definitely have settled down with that. And I say that most of the sort of top 100, kind of understand this process. Top 50 is that just keep working hard. When it's your week, make it your week, and trust that it's going to happen 4 or 5 times a year. On a really good year, maybe 6 or 7 times, and
Hmm.
your rank is going to climb that way. But it is about winning streaks rather than
Hmm.
just 50%, or you could have it
Yeah.
less than 50%,
Right. Right.
but
That's
still a
such.
very good year.
Yeah. No, it's such an important point, and that aware that's like meta awareness, where it's like you're seeing the big picture. And I also hear pressure being this concept of keeping that learning mentality, staying away from the shiny object in practice. Um, that's hard to do, right? It's hard to stay present. And so I think you're right. Skin in the game. You mentioned Krychek with skin in the
Yeah,
game. And this learning mentality. Um, and power and feeling. You mentioned feeling
yeah,
too. I think that's underrated. I think we often say words in our head, be tough, but what does it feel like to be
yeah.
tough, right?
Yes, and players intrinsically know when they're on the right track.
Mm, right.
And if they feel like they're on the right track, the results don't matter that much.
Hmm.
When they feel like they're on the right track, they know the results will come. They really start to feel that.
Yeah.
And then that trust becomes really, really, really important.
Yeah.
There was one other thing I was going to say. Um, just gone from my head. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, last big point that I wanted just to touch on. Again, this is for coaches. You know, you personally, how do you manage your own state, your own emotions, your own psychophysiological, being, so that you're showing up for your players? I see a lot of stressed out coaches out there. How do you manage that, and what kind of impact does that have on players if you're panicked or maybe nervous system is a little shot? Um, we know through the science our nervous systems are talking to each other. So it's important, obviously, to be grounded. But how do you take care of yourself, traveling around the world, doing all the things you have to do?
Um, I mean, I have a philosophy and I'm very proud of this. I think any player that I've worked with will say Dave shows up the same every day.
Hmm.
I mean, because players have such a topsy-turvy life, they can't have a coach doing that, in my opinion. You
Mm.
can't have a coach that's 4 seasons, in one day, up, down. Well, I mean, you can, but it's rocky. So,
Hmm.
you know, I really I don't have to think about it, and I haven't had to for years and years. It's like, but it was something that because I'd experienced, college coaches and that were up and down and stuff, and obviously didn't have that many coaches in my career, but observing as well coaches up and down with players. I will never be that coach. I
Mm-hmm.
will never be that coach. I will show up the same every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't mean internally I always feel exactly the same every day, but then when I'm not feeling totally, you know, you know, content, relaxed, I really work hard to not show it,
Mm-hmm.
with body language and everything like that. And I think that's a decision you just make as a coach. The second thing is don't be a hypocrite. We're asking our players to take the pressure and be calm under pressure. If you're all over the place, I'm sorry, that's like, parents, I want my kids not to be nervous. Oh my God, I can't believe it. And they're like this on the side of the court. Hold on a second. If you can't take the pressure and you're not playing, how the hell can you demand it of them? You cannot,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And of course, that doesn't mean I don't get nervous sitting on the side. You get in a tight situation. Of course, you get nervous as the coach. Try not to show it at all, and be encouraging. But I do have a saying in my head that helps me in those. When I really start to feel the stress, I just sort of take a deep breath and I go, "What's going to happen is going to happen.
Mm.
What's going to happen is going to happen. So just support and see what happens." And that immediately will take me down a couple of notches to like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what's going to happen is going to happen. Uh, and then in terms of the travel and everything like that, I have to say it's getting a little more difficult as I've gotten older but again, I've learned to know myself, and doing something physical really helps. But I no longer can handle, if I say I'm going to go in the gym for 45 minutes or even 30 minutes, my brain can't handle that. So I've, for the last sort of 6, 7 years, I've had this little and often approach. I mean, I'll literally go in a gym and do 2 exercises and leave. But I might
Mm-hmm.
do that twice a day, or I'll just do some balancing exercises, you know, somewhere for 2 minutes, a minute on each leg, and so I try to just do little and often, and I find that actually psychologically I can handle it, and then I have, two little things. If I can run 3 miles, you know, at a decent pace, but get through 3 miles without, stopping, I feel I'm in a good place. And I have box jumps. If I can, jump, 30 inches or 36 inches, and I'll do that maybe like once a month. It's kind of like two things that those are like, okay, I'm in decent shape if I can do that. And I'm not looking to, be Mr. Buff or anything like that. It's more for psychologically just to feel better. And I can't handle long sessions. A 3 mile run is about as long as I can handle. That's, it's sort of 36 minutes, 35 minutes. It's not a lightning pace either, but it's more
Mm-hmm.
about just getting through 3 miles that
Mm-hmm.
that is like, okay, I'm still okay.
I still got it. I still
You
got
know,
it. Yeah.
I've still got enough anyway.
Enough. Yeah.
And the box jumps is something I just feel like if you've still got spring in your legs, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 63 and still doing those box jumps. It's, I don't know. I mean, there might be loads of 63-year-olds who can do way more, I'm sure. But for me, it's like, okay, I've still got some spring in my legs. So that kind of,
Yeah.
it used to be 5 pull-ups as well, but
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that anymore. So I've had to drop that from my regime. And I started to get like shoulder pain if I do them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
drop that from my regime. So and then the rest is yeah, just again, just it's not life or death tennis.
Mm.
Might seem like it, but it's not. And
Mm.
so I try to always, if I'm starting to feel a bit stressed or something, but trust me, I mean, there are times I wake up at 3 in the morning. It's like, oh my God, I need to tell the player this and that. And then I'll make a note and everything like that. And I think, why am I waking up at 3 in the morning for for a player? But it happens, I mean,
Yeah.
and it's just something in your head, like you go, I've got to tell him this,
Yeah.
this is important or whatever. And
Yeah.
then unless I get up and write it down, it just turns in my head over and over. And I've learned just get up and bloody write it down, and then I've got a better chance of going back to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I that's a great point and something I want to just highlight for coaches, or anyone really in particular. Have some kind of journal next to your bed. I call it a brain dump. And you got that 3 a.m. thought, jot that thing down so it's somewhere, and then you can go back to bed. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a testament that you care about your players enough to be thinking about them. Um,
I
and
didn't
then
go to sleep thinking about it, but somehow it's in
it's
there.
still in there. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Oh,
Probably
and
full.
I can, sorry, just to interrupt, but I can kick myself when something like that comes in my head and then I don't, and somehow I do fall back to sleep, and then I wake up in the morning, I can't remember it. And
Mm,
that just is an absolute killer. I just, oh,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now you're like in that regret state,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Probably the last thing, I'm thinking full circle back to when you were younger and you realize that rest is important, as well. Seems like you do a good job of you're on, and you're off, you're off. And I think that's an important point for coaches too. The grind, it's enough of a grind, and yet to be efficient and optimal as a coach, to be able to sit there and not freak out when you're in either in the stands or at practice. You have to take care of yourself too, and that does require some recuperation, right?
And when you're a young coach, it is difficult because, you know, players aren't going to say, no, I don't want you there.
Yeah.
You got to just tell them, I will do this, this, and that, and I'm not going to, I need this time off,
Yeah.
but again, I mean, in a way, you kind of train the player to get a good rhythm, but the same for them. They need to have rest, and you
Hmm.
got to make a call sometimes, with a player when you see they kind of burned out. Going to another tournament isn't going to work.
Right.
It's like, okay, let's just cut it here. Go and have a couple of weeks off. Keep ticking over with the body, but you don't hit a tennis ball until you feel like you really want to hit it. And when you really want to hit a tennis ball again, that means you're ready to come back. So it's yeah, I mean, and I don't want to sit here and say there's any perfect way of doing this, because there isn't. It's the same with the players having to get better and learn all the time.
Hmm.
Coaches, same thing. You learn about yourself, you learn about things, and I have these battles in my head. When I was younger, I was much more, um, uh, you know, kind of aggressive with players and like, come on, and players did pretty well, and now I'm very, very laid back, and players do well.
Mm.
uh but I sometimes wonder if the young me was a better version for players or not, and there's no way of knowing that because I can't be that person anymore. And I do believe the way I coach now is far superior. uh,
Hmm.
and I've been on this, journey. But it doesn't mean that I don't think, wow, maybe, because it'd be like the Dave Sammel of 20 years ago wouldn't take this shit at all and would, you know, but now it's like, okay, where's the player coming from? And that maybe, and I'm, I'm more, I'm more forgiving than I was. But in
Hmm.
some ways, I ask way tougher questions. So
Mm.
it's maybe more difficult working with me in different ways now. But
Right.
I mean, I think it's only normal if you're going to be a good coach that you reflect on all the time on what you're doing, and keep trying to forge a slightly better path.
Hmm.
And again, you don't ever know for sure the answer.
It's so great to hear that. And just speaking about authenticity and evolution, your own self changing. And yeah, I guess I'll leave our coaching listeners with the advice you're giving to players, which is as a coach, maybe establish a vision of who you want to be, know your style, and develop some practices to be able to evolve as a person and as a coach. Um, because I think the more coaches model that development for themselves, the more they're going to be, insightful for players, and they're going to be able to bring what they're learning, even about themselves, into their coaching, which I think ultimately will help them be able to be better communicators, better coaches, stay in the game for longer.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'd say is also step out of tennis.
Mm,
So, I've done business executive coaching courses, I've done mentoring courses, I'd say most of my learning, especially in the last 10 years, has come from going outside of the sport to
mm.
learn how to teach better and how to manage, people better. And I think those skills translate actually surprisingly well to
Mm.
to to coaching tennis.
It's a great final point. Dave, hey, thanks a lot. This has been a real pleasure. It's great to
Thank you.
great
Thank
great
you
to
for
talk to you, learn from you. I know if you're
and Mike.
watching if you're watching as a coach, hey, take your time with this one. Watch it again, pause, reflect, and I would suggest even reflect with a journal for yourself as to what stands out but looking forward to more and Dave, thanks for being part of this.
Yes.